Fritz Smith is the secondary protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, being playable on Night 7 or Custom Night. Fritz takes over for the main protagonist, Jeremy Fitzgerald, and is then fired after only one night for tampering with the animatronics and odor. And that's the last we saw of Fritz. Just a one-off character to show Jeremy got moved to the day shift, right? Well, some people say no. Some people say Fritz is the main protagonist of the series up until FNaF 6, Michael Afton. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of this theory before. It's one of the more popular theories because Matt Pat believed it in his 2017 timeline, and even still believed it up until his retirement. And Michael's a fan favorite character, and if he's in 2, he can't be Jeremy because it's implied he gets bit, and there's more pointing towards him being Fritz. I already made a video on this. It was my first theory, in fact, so you might be wondering, why are you making another one? Well, it's because I think I can go more in depth into why I believe this theory. My last one, it was good, but I only really used like 3 pieces of evidence, and I don't even agree with my explanation of the overall narrative in that video, and I'm gonna make the most definitive video on Mike Fritz ever, and prove Mike is Fritz. Until the Fritz game debunks it. First though, let's talk about who he's not. Phone Guy. Phone Fritz is a popular theory, mostly because Phone Guy is a fan favorite character and it would be nice to get a name for him and play as him, and I agree, I kinda wish Phone Fritz was true, but it's not. Why? Well, it's simple. Phone Guy said he would work the night shift when the place reopened, and it was not reopened during Night 7. There's also the fact that Fritz is fired, and in the logbook we learn about Fazbear Entertainment's policies of not hiring previous employees, so they probably wouldn't hire him back like I've seen some people say. And I just want to say, no, this isn't evidence against Mike Fritz, since Mike doesn't use the name Fritz in FNaF 1, and FNaF 1 takes place years after FNaF 2. He could look entirely different, or different enough to where he wouldn't be recognized. I also don't think Fritz is the father of Fritz, the MCI victim. My reasoning is pretty simple. The grave just says Fritz and not Fritz Jr., same reason I don't believe Jeremy is the father of the MCI Jeremy. I think if Scott wanted to tell us both of the protagonists in FNaF 2 were fathers of William's victims, I don't see why he wouldn't simply ask the artist to add juniors to both of their gravestones, especially in this final game meant to clear things up. There's also another Fritz theory that I actually think is really good, which is the theory that he's Henry. I want to make a whole video about that, so I'm not going to go in depth about it here, but I do think it's not true, but I think it's pretty good. Another theory that I think is likely, and I would believe if I didn't believe Mike Fritz, is the theory that Fritz is a Fredbear employee. Pretty good theory. Obviously I don't believe it though, because I believe Mike Fritz. With everyone he can't be out of the way, let's go into some of the evidence that he is Mike. Let's start with probably what is in my opinion the worst piece of evidence first, which is they have similar reasons for being fired. Now I don't think it's unfair to make a connection between these characters because of that, but logically they don't have to be the same person to have these same reasons for being fired. We know why Fritz has odor, and it's not because it's a corpse or anything, it's because he tampered with the animatronics, and we know the animatronics smell awful thanks to what Phone Guy said in this very game.
The idea at first was to repair them. They even started retrofitting them with some of the newer technology. The thing was just so ugly, you know? And the smell.
And the newspapers in FNaF 1. So while this is like a fair piece of evidence, I don't think it's very good, and I kind of grown to hate it because it's the most popular piece of evidence, obviously. So whenever I see someone, you know, who doesn't believe Mike Fritz, they say, people only believe it because of this, when obviously that's not true, and I still have like another 20 minutes in this video. I feel like it's probably the worst piece of evidence. There's better evidence that you can use. It can be easily explained away as well. So yeah, now let's get into some better evidence, which is, of course, Fritz's name. Now let's just get this out of the way. Yes, Fritz's name is a combination of Mike Schmidt and Jeremy Fitzgerald's name. Fitz equals Fritz, and Smith is Schmidt in German. Actually, I wonder if that's Mike Jeremy evidence. Anyway, yeah, his name is a combination of that. But that doesn't mean his name couldn't have a different meaning now, especially his first name. Let's get the last name out of the way. Like I just said, Smith is Schmidt in German. Mike Schmidt is Michael's alias in FNaF 1, or he legally changed his last name to detach himself from William. Already a connection there. Now, Fritz's first name is the more interesting connection, in my opinion. Fritz is the same name as the kid who possesses Foxy, and Mike wore a Foxy mask when he killed his brother. And what's so great about this is Scott only made Fritz the name of the Foxy kid after FNaF 2 and 4, and after the theory of Mike being Fritz became popular. He could have made the name literally anything else, so why make it Fritz if we're not supposed to connect it back to Fritz Smith? He also included Jeremy's name, so obviously we're supposed to connect it back to FNaF 2. Unless Fritz's father is true, but then why have it be the Foxy kid? Why not Freddy or Bonnie? That's kind of a moot point now that I'm reading it out loud. You know, it could actually just be a coincidence, as opposed to what some people will have you say. Scott does do coincidences sometimes. So basically, when we simplify Fritz's name, basically Foxy Kid Schmidt, which I mean, come on, that's Mike, isn't it? Another piece of evidence is FNaF 6 ended. I know what you're thinking, right? Henry never hinted that Mike was Fritz in his speech, so what do you mean? And you're right, he didn't. But the visuals did. Notice how during Henry's speech, images from FNaF 1 and 2 fade in. Not on the monitor, they fade in over the whole screen, most likely implying these are the thoughts of our protagonist, who is all but confirmed to be Mike. And not only that, but these images are from the camera specifically, something only a guard could have seen. And also, notice how there are no FNAF 3 images? Maybe that's implying Mike isn't the FNAF 3 protagonist. There is just one problem with this though, and that is, this cutscene is 100% not from Michael's perspective, and I can prove it pretty easily. In-game, Michael passes out when the temperature reaches 120 degrees, yet in this cutscene, it goes up to 179. If this cutscene was from Michael's perspective, it would be like this.
Every tragedy should. And to you monsters,
Also, the monitor's just kind of like in a void. There's no fucking cup, there's no fucking paper. I don't even fucking know where this is. So since this cutscene isn't from Mike's perspective, that kind of throws out the whole point about the photos fading in. Maybe these are just supposed to be references to what Henry is talking about. But then again, why didn't they appear on the monitor itself? I mean, the fucking 8-bit minigames do. So why not these? I don't know. Another piece of evidence comes from the books, and actually the story Sea Bonnies. Please guys, hear me out on this one. I swear I'm not crazy. I swear this is good. I'm not looking into it too deep. I swear, please just hear me out. In the story, there's a fish named Fritz, who is eventually killed by the Sea Bonnies, who then use his body to move around, I guess. I don't know. I won't lie, guys. I just read the story for this video. And not only that, Fritz turns from, the orange fish color to a blue color. Now, doesn't that sound kind of like a metaphor for when Mike got killed by Ennard, who used his body until it turned a purple color, but was actually blue at one point? It's pretty much just like when Ennard used Mike's body and then left it after it decayed, right? It's just like that, except it's a fish named Fritz. It's a very similar situation to Mike, so there could be a very good connection here. Similar situation, already a popular theory that Michael is Fritz. I don't know why I called out specifically that he was blue. I don't think the color actually matters. What matters is that it's like the same situation. Now, I'll admit, at first I thought this was a weak piece of evidence because it came from Frights and they reuse names all the time. I mean, they reuse the name Mike multiple times and only one of those guys is actually Michael Afton. Until I looked into it a bit more, and I found out this is the only time the name Fritz is used in the books. In fact, it's the only time in the whole series it's reused besides the name for the MCI kid who can already connect back to Mike. Now, this could be a coincidence. It would be a huge one, but it still could be one. I mean, we don't know what Scott told Andrea to write for this story. It's still an interesting connection, though. Although, obviously, the events of Mike being scooped and Fritz being killed are different. I do believe Scott did commission it, just because it would be such a huge coincidence. If Andrea just came up with the name, I do believe Scott probably told her to, do the name Fritz as a hint towards, Mike Fritz, right? But I feel like the immediate defense to that could be like, oh, it's just a reference to the theory. It doesn't actually mean anything. But I think if Scott did that, that would be incredibly shitty of him to do, basically. Because think about it, this book series, Frights is meant to clear things up. It's meant to clear up things from the past. So they just reference the theory for basically no reason. No reason. There's not evidence towards anything. It's just reference. So that'd be not horrible. I was about to say horrible. It's not that deep, but it'd be pretty shitty to do. And I really don't see why Scott would do that. I do think there's gonna be something else we talk about later that I do think is just a reference. But this, I don't think it is. I just think it'd be incredibly shitty if it was. So that is why I do think this is important. I think this is probably the best piece of evidence for Mike Fritz, because it's literally basically just a character named Fritz going through a similar incident to Mike getting scooped. Different circumstances, right? But still, it's an obvious connection, right? Like, different circumstances, same result, right? And also, let's take a look at FNAF 4, more specifically the Halloween update. This update introduced multiple new characters. However, a majority of them were deemed not canon until later in the series, except for one, Nightmare Balloon Boy. Nightmare Balloon Boy apparently fits in the story, but how? Well, we know that Michael is the protagonist of FNAF 4, having nightmares based on his past experiences at Freddy's. Wouldn't that mean he would have had to see Balloon Boy at some point to have nightmares about him? And I know what you're thinking. Balloon Boy could have existed before FNAF 2, or Mike could have seen him outside of the night shift. And that's all true, but it's still interesting that, Balloon Boy is the only canon FNAF 2 animatronic, and also he even reuses the same voice lines too. Another possible explanation you could be thinking of is maybe Nightmare Balloon Boy was used in the experiments, right, and that's why it's canon, but the others aren't, they weren't used. However, I'm pretty sure the experiments did not exist when FNAF 4 came out. There's not really any reason to think they do. The experiments don't really impact the plot of FNAF 4 anyway, so I don't think that would be the explanation for why Nightmare Balloon Boy is canon. And also, let me explain why Nightmare Yawn and Nightmare Mangle are not canon to Mike's dreams if he worked at the FNAF 2 location. I mean, they should be able to fit just fine, right? Well, it's because they actually take over the role of characters in the main gameplay, with one taking over the role of the main antagonist. But Fun with Plushtrap is not the main gameplay, so I'm guessing that means Mike can either dream of Plushtrap or BB. And also, Nightmare Mangle should be able to fit in fine either way, because Mike's sister had a Mangle toy. Something else I just want to point out is that I've actually seen Nightmare BB used as evidence for Mike working in FNAF 3, since the main mechanic in that game is luring away Springtrap with Balloon Boy's voice lines. And, you know, he takes over Springtrap's role. Well, Plushtrap, but let's be honest, Plushtrap is fucking Springtrap. So, yeah, you know, I just want to point that out. You know, it's kind of interesting. Something else that I want to point out that I just found out recently is that the FNaF 4 bedroom actually has the same basic setup as the FNaF 2 office. 2 doors or vents, and then something in the middle, the hallway or the closet. Now, obviously, now that we know that gameplay was real, this doesn't really matter, but remember, like I said earlier, the experiments most likely did not exist in 2015, so there has to be an alternative explanation, and Mike working FNaF 2 and having dreams based off of The Office could explain that. I don't know if it's no solid piece of evidence, but I want to throw it in there. Surprisingly, another piece of evidence comes from the FNaF movie. During Mike's first scene at Freddy's, he finds a tape left for him by William with his name on it. But Mike's name isn't the only name written. Faded behind his name is the name Fritz, and what's interesting is that Fritz isn't the guard before Mike, as revealed in the movie novel. The guy's name is Bob. Could this be a connection to Mike being Fritz in the games, with the original name on the tape being the name Mike originally went by before FNaF 1? It's at the very least a reference to the theory. Then again, this could mean Mike isn't Fritz, because obviously Fritz was a previous night guard in some capacity, even if he's not Bob. But like I said, definitely a reference, so Scott at least acknowledges the theory. With all my evidence stated, let's go over some problems with this theory. The age. If Mike was anything younger than 14 in 1983, let's say 12, he can't be Fritz, because you have to be at least 18 to work a night shift position. Wow, this is a huge problem, right? Well, no, not really. First of all, we don't know how old he was in FNaF 4, he could be 14. And also, if Mike is willing to lie about his name, he would be willing to lie about his age too. The next problem, why does Mike use the name Fritz Smith in FNaF 2, but every other time he works at Freddy's, he uses the name Mike Schmidt, as far as we know? There are a couple different explanations. There's a very good one that we'll talk about when we break down the narrative under this theory. So some of the ones that I don't think are as good, one of them that I came up with was that Fritz Smith is Mike's legal name, but he didn't like it, so he changed it to Mike Schmidt by FNaF 1. Just like a dumb one. I don't really believe that. You know, maybe he just didn't want to be recognized, and then by FNaF 1 he felt confident enough that he used his first name instead of changing the whole thing. I don't know. I mean, the name Mike is not that uncommon, so him using it as a fake name and just changing his last name and still not wanting to be recognized isn't really that much of a stretch, you know. It's still a fake name. Maybe Mike was just feeling lazy during FNaF 1, who knows. Another idea, maybe he's honoring Fritz, the MCI victim. Now I'm saying that out loud, that doesn't really work, because, you know, Fritz was not the name of the Foxy Kid during FNaF 2. Yeah, never mind, scratch that one's not that good. We'll talk about what I believe later. You know, I will admit, while editing this video, I did realize trying to find a reason for Mike to use a fake name that works during FNaF 2 when it came out is a little bit challenging. It doesn't really matter, I guess, because the evidence is there for Mike Fritz for it to be true, so we just have to find the reason. So I don't know what the explanation will be when FNaF 2 came out. Actually, wait, maybe the explanation for when FNaF 2 came out was, you know, Mike is already implied in FNaF 1 to have some kind of connection with the victims of the It's Me hallucinations. So, something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Yeah, I guess trying to find a reason for Mike to use a fake name is a little bit tricky. Doesn't really matter, the evidence is there. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Maybe he just didn't want to be recognized for whatever reason. I mean, his father did probably go on the run, so who knows. Another thing some people use to debunk Mike Fritz is that Mike gets fired for general unprofessionalism while Fritz doesn't. This is pretty easy to counter with the fact that Fritz only works 1 night while Mike works 7, so he would simply have more time to be unprofessional than Fritz. Although being unprofessional does seem to be one of Mike's characteristics, because it shows back up in the logbook, because the shit he fucking draws in the logbook is not professional. Speaking of the logbook, that's another thing people use to debunk Mike Fritz. The main thing here is that Mike doesn't actually reference FNaF 2 at all, and I thought this was a pretty huge problem too, until I realized Mike doesn't really reference FNaF 1 either. Sure, he draws FNaF 1 Freddy, but FNaF 1 Freddy is all over the place, and it might not even be Freddy. It could be Fredbear, who we learn at UCN looks basically exactly like FNaF 1 Freddy. And the only games Mike directly references are FNaF 4 and Sister Location, which makes sense, since Scott would have to clarify that Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton, who is also the FNaF 4 protagonist, and from there we can make the connection of Mike being Fritz. And then I guess the Fritz game could debunk this theory, but that's not fucking out yet, so who knows, it could confirm it too. And now we have to think about the big question, which is why? Why is Michael working as Fritz? Because, you know, it's one thing to just say a theory and lay out all the evidence. We also have to think about how it fits into the story. You can't just have characters doing stuff for no reason. I mean, you can, but it's not very satisfying. It has to fit somehow, so how does it? Well, there's 2 possibilities that I can see for Mike being Fritz. There's technically 3, the third of which is he just wanted a job, but that doesn't really make sense as to why he would change his name, and his alias is the first name of one of William's victims. That idea doesn't really work as well as the main 2. I still think it's a valid opinion, valid option. I just don't believe it. So let's talk about the main two ideas. Let's start with, in my opinion, the least likely of the two. For this, we have to look at the FNaF 2 dream sequences. Not a lot of people pay attention to these cutscenes, which makes sense. They don't really matter to the story. But what if they do? There's a popular theory that these dreams are Mike's during FNaF 1. The animatronics are basically calling him back, kind of like in the movie. What if instead these dreams actually take place during FNaF 2, and the animatronics are calling Mike for some reason? Maybe something to do with the bite victim, and then eventually Michael works at Freddy's because of these dreams. Pretty interesting idea, right? Yeah, it is, but I do have some problems with it. For one, why are they calling Mike to work at Freddy's now when he hasn't worked there before as far as we know? And then why did they try to kill him on night 7 if they called him there? These problems just don't really make the idea work for me. I do believe Mike is the dreamer for reasons I'll get to in another video, but still, it relies on another theory to work. It's not as strong for me. The other idea, which I think is much stronger and works better, is that Mike was sent to the location not by the animatronics but by William. Why? Well, I don't really know for sure. I'm just gonna say William wanted Mike to watch the animatronics, see if the toys were possessed because he couldn't tell on the day shift or something. That's just what I'm going with right now, but there are multiple different reasons. And maybe that's why Fritz already knows how to survive the night. He already knows to put down the mask, plant at the box, flash Foxy, all that. And this could even be why Mike's alias is the name of an MCI victim. William gave him the name of one of his victims, and specifically the Foxy Kid, because Foxy is heavily applied to be Mike's favorite, since he wears a Foxy mask in FNaF 4. And that's definitely something William would do. Unlike the last idea, this one actually has evidence. Well, kind of. It's mostly up for interpretation. FNaF 6, there is a poster that some people think is supposed to represent the Afton family. And on this poster, the man who represents William holds a puppet that looks like him, who is supposed to be Mike. This implies that William used Mike as a puppet. Could that imply that William sent Mike to Freddy's to do something, which is why he tampers with the animatronics? Maybe, although there are problems with this too. The poster could be about Sister Location, where William sent Mike to put Elizabeth back together. Or this could be about the FNaF 6 antagonists. The man would be William, the puppet would be Lefty, the clown would be Baby, and the bear would be Molten Freddy. And that's really the only piece of evidence for Mike accomplice, and it's already not the best. So now personally, I do think this is why Mike worked as Fritz, because I just think it's the most logical. This could even explain why in FNaF 1 he's just using his first name with a different surname, or just his legal name. It's because he's not working under William's orders like in FNaF 2. The thing is with all these ideas is that they're kind of too fan fiction-y, I guess. We need more information to find out why Mike is Fritz. Maybe we could get a game about it or something. So you know what, in the end, even if I didn't convince you of Mike Fritz, I at least hope I managed to make you respect the theory a little more. Although this is a popular theory, it does get quite a bit of hate, mostly because, the most popular piece of evidence is the paycheck, which can be easily explained away. So I just kind of want to make the theory a bit more respectable. So what do you think? Do you think Mike is Fritz? Or maybe is Jeremy? Or he isn't in FNaF 2 at all? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, why don't you subscribe to see more of my videos, and, so I can get paid more. Alright, see ya.